stillness, you are speaking. Where the holy ones draw near, not in thunder, not in shouting, but the whisper we can hear behind the veil of reverence, in the place no pride can stand. You reveal your sacred counsel to the heart within your hand. Sod of Adonai, secret of the Holy One, hidden from the proud, given to the humble Son. Teach me how to fear you, teach me how to stay in the Sod of Adonai, in your secret place.
Today we will be talking about the Sod of Adonai, the secret council, the heavenly courts, and those who stand before him. In our previous teachings, we entered the meaning of the Sod of Adonai. We learned that Sod is more than concealed information. It speaks of intimate counsel, of divine confidence, and of mysteries entrusted by Adonai to servants prepared by the Ruach HaKodesh. We also followed the servant into the secret place where revelation is guarded until the appointed time. But today we are not returning to those foundations. Today we are passing through the doorway they opened. We are no longer asking only what is the sod, who may receive the mysteries of Adonai, how must the servant carry what has been revealed. Today we are asking a different and more majestic question. What happens within the council of heaven? What did the prophets see when the veil opened, and they were permitted to behold the throne, the assembly, the deliberation, and the decree? Scripture contains extraordinary moments when an earthly servant was allowed to see beyond the visible world. The prophet did not merely receive a sentence or hear an isolated voice. The prophet was shown the heavenly setting from which the word proceeded. A throne was present. Adonai was seated as king. Heavenly beings stood around him. A matter concerning the earth was brought before the heavenly assembly. A judgment was spoken. A messenger was commissioned. Then what had been determined above began to unfold below. This is the new territory before us. The sod is not only the place where a secret is whispered. In several biblical visions, it is also the place where the government of heaven is revealed. The mystery is not only the message, but the place from which it comes. When a prophetic word reaches the earth, human beings normally hear only the final declaration. A king will rise, a kingdom will fall, a city will be judged, a servant will be sent, a period of mercy will open, an appointed judgment will begin. But the prophets were occasionally shown that the spoken word did not emerge from emptiness. Behind the word was the throne. And behind the earthly announcement was a heavenly reality. The visible world was receiving the outcome of something already known, witnessed, or decreed before Adonai. This is why the sod cannot be reduced to the discovery of secret information. The deeper mystery is not merely what the prophet heard. It is that the prophet was permitted to perceive the heavenly order surrounding the word. The prophet was shown that history does not govern heaven. Heaven governs history. Kings may believe that they are acting only from their ambitions. Armies may believe that their victories are determined only by numbers, and nations may imagine that the future belongs to whoever possesses the greatest earthly strength. Yet the prophets repeatedly pull back the veil and reveal another government. Above the throne of every earthly ruler is the throne of Adonai. Above every human court is the court of heaven. Beyond every earthly record are the records known before the Almighty. Behind the movements of kingdoms are purposes that human beings may not recognize until the appointed time. Psalm 89 speaks of the assembly of the holy ones and declares that Adonai is greatly feared among those surrounding him. The passage does not place these beings beside Adonai as equals. It emphasizes the opposite. None in the heavens can be compared with him. He alone is supreme within the assembly. This distinction is essential. The heavenly council does not limit the sovereignty of Adonai. Adonai is not one voice competing with other voices. He does not need permission to rule. He is not elected by the assembly. He is not advised because he lacks knowledge. He is the king, the judge, the source of wisdom, and the one from whom the decree receives its authority. The council reveals heavenly order, not divided sovereignty. Those surrounding him stand because he is seated. They serve because he commands. They speak because he permits them to speak. They go because he sends them. The mystery, therefore, is not that Adonai depends upon a council. The mystery is that the Almighty chooses to reveal his government through an ordered heavenly assembly in which witnesses stand, servants attend, accusations are heard, judgments are declared, and messengers are commissioned. And in certain moments, an earthly prophet is allowed to see it. That prophet then returns to earth carrying more than information. The prophet carries testimony. He can say, in effect, I know that this word does not originate in the imagination of men because I was shown the throne from which it came. What it means to stand before Adonai. Throughout Scripture, standing before Adonai is a language of position, service, readiness, and authorized presence. It does not simply mean that Adonai sees a person. All creation is visible before him. To stand before him carries a more particular meaning. The one standing is present before the king. The one standing is awaiting instruction. The one standing is prepared to serve. The one standing has not entered casually, but occupies a place connected to calling and commission. Elijah used this language when he declared, As Adonai of hosts lives, before whom I stand. Eliyahu was physically standing on the earth, preparing to confront an earthly king. Yet he identified himself according to a higher position. He understood that his true service was performed before Adonai. Ahab saw a prophet standing before him, but Eliyahu knew that he first stood before the heavenly king. This changes the meaning of prophetic authority. The prophet is not powerful because he commands attention on earth. The prophet carries authority because he has been sent from the presence of the one before whom he stands. The earthly ruler may possess a palace, soldiers, wealth, and political power, but the servant standing before Adonai comes from a court higher than the palace. This does not make the servant proud, it makes the servant accountable. To stand before the king means that the servant cannot alter the message to please the listener. The servant cannot take a decree from the heavenly court and reshape it according to the desires of an earthly court. The servant cannot speak peace when heaven has declared a warning. The servant cannot announce judgment where Adonai has extended mercy. The servant's responsibility is not to make the word comfortable. The servant's responsibility is to carry the word faithfully. But there is another distinction we must make. Standing before Adonai does not always mean that every being present shares the same character, purpose, or relationship with him. The opening chapters of Iyov, Job, also show that appearing before the heavenly court does not mean that every being present has the same character, standing, or purpose. Some appear as servants, some as witnesses, and some in an adversarial or accusatory role. We will return to this scene later, because Job's story reveals what can happen when a proceeding known in heaven remains concealed from the person experiencing its consequences upon the earth. Some stand as faithful servants, some stand as messengers, some stand as witnesses, some may appear in an accusatory role. Some are present because they have been summoned to give an account. The court belongs to Adonai, and all who appear there remain under his authority. This will become increasingly important as we move deeper into the biblical visions. We must allow each passage to identify the function of those present rather than giving every heavenly figure the same title or purpose. The phrase standing before Adonai therefore contains several dimensions. There is the standing of service, there is a standing of readiness, a standing of a witness, a standing of accountability, there is the standing of the commission, and there is the prophetic privilege of being permitted to behold what ordinarily remains concealed from earthly sight. The true servant understands that standing before Adonai is not a decoration added to a ministry, it is the source of the servant's responsibility. The closer the servant stands to the throne, the less freedom the servant has to corrupt what proceeds from it. Let's talk about Jeremiah 23 and the prophet who did not stand in the council. Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, gives us one of the strongest biblical tests of prophetic authenticity. The chapter describes prophets who spoke visions from their own hearts. They offered confidence where correction was needed. They strengthened people who continued in rebellion. They used the language of revelation, but the source of their message was not the counsel of Adonai. Then the question is asked, who has stood in the Sod of Adonai that he should perceive and hear his word? This question takes us beyond eloquence. A person may speak beautifully and still not have stood in the council. A person may use sacred language and still not have received the word from the throne. A person may gather an audience, repeat the language of other teachers, describe dreams, and pronounce blessings while remaining outside the reality being claimed. Jeremiah's test is not, did the prophet speak confidently? Did he attract followers? Did the message sound mysterious? Did the prophet promise peace? Did the people enjoy hearing it? The question is, did the prophet stand in the council of Adonai? Did the prophet perceive his word? Did the prophet truly hear what proceeded from him? The false prophets of Jeremiah's generation possessed messages, but they had not received those messages from the heavenly council. They spoke from their own inner visions and then attached the authority of Adonai to what they had produced. This is a serious form of spiritual theft. Later in the chapter, Adonai speaks against prophets who steal words from one another and then declare them as divine utterance. This reveals another difference between repeating a message and standing in the council of Adonai. A person may repeat something true that was heard from another servant. The information may even be accurate. But repeating a true statement does not mean the person personally witnessed the counsel from which the statement originally came. We must be careful here because there is nothing wrong with learning from faithful teachers. Scripture itself is taught from generation to generation. The problem arises when borrowed understanding is presented as personal revelation. Jeremiah exposes prophets who took words into their mouths without carrying the encounter, commission, or responsibility belonging to those words. The true prophet does not merely possess vocabulary. He has been confronted by the word. The word has entered the prophet's life. He has perceived its weight. The prophet understands that the message belongs to Adonai and cannot be used for self-exaltation. This is why Jeremiah immediately gives us the fruit by which the true counsel can be recognized. Adonai says that if these prophets had truly stood in his counsel, they would have caused his people to hear his words. They would have turned the people from their evil way and from the evil of their actions. This is one of the strongest safeguards in the chapter. The sod is not proven merely by the presence of unusual knowledge. The heavenly origin of a message is revealed by its agreement with the character, covenant, justice, mercy, and purposes of Adonai. A message from the council does not encourage rebellion against the king whose counsel it claims to reveal. It does not tell people that covenant unfaithfulness is harmless. It does not use mystery to remove accountability. It does not flatter the hearer into spiritual sleep. The true word awakens. It exposes what is concealed. It turns the heart toward Adonai. It calls the rebellious back to the covenant. It may comfort the broken, but it does not strengthen deliberate corruption. It may announce restoration, but it does not separate restoration from truth. Rashi's interpretation of Jeremiah 23:18 connects standing in the council with hearing what is decreed and with listening faithfully to the word and commandments of Adonai. Although this is a later Jewish commentary rather than the biblical text itself, it preserves the important connection between counsel and obedient attention. Jeremiah therefore gives us 3 levels of distinction. First, there are those who speak from their own hearts. Second, there are those who take words already spoken and claim them as their own revelation. Third, there is the servant who has truly perceived and heard the word proceeding from Adonai. The difference is not merely the content of the sentence, it is the source, the encounter, the commission, and the fruit. This is also why a prophet who has stood in the council may carry a message that the earthly court does not want to hear. The prophet is not sent to echo the atmosphere of the palace. The prophet is sent to interrupt the palace with the decision of heaven. And no biblical scene demonstrates this more dramatically than the vision given to Micaiah. Let's talk about Micaiah, Job, and the opening of the heavenly court. In 1 Kings 22, 2 earthly kings are seated before a gathering of prophets. Ahab, king of Israel, wants to go to war against Ramoth-Gilead. Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, asks that they first inquire for the word of Adonai. Approximately 400 prophets announce success. Their message is unified, favorable, agrees with the desire of the king, and creates the appearance of certainty. One prophet even constructs iron horns and performs a prophetic sign, declaring that the king will use them to push the Arameans until they are consumed. Everything in the earthly court appears to confirm victory. There is only one problem. The earthly consensus does not agree with the heavenly decree. Micaiah is summoned reluctantly because Ahab says that he never prophesies good concerning him. Before Micaiah arrives, the messenger urges him to agree with the other prophets. He is being invited to enter the consensus before he has even spoken. But Micaiah answers that he will speak what Adonai gives him. Then the veil opens. Micaiah declares, I saw Adonai sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. This is no longer merely a contest between one prophet and 400 prophets. Micaiah reveals that the real contrast is between the earthly court and the heavenly court. Below, Ahab is seated among prophets who tell him what he desires to hear. Above, Adonai is seated upon the throne, and the true outcome of Ahab's campaign is already known within the heavenly scene. The heavenly host stands around the throne. A question is presented concerning who will entice Ahab to go up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead. Different responses are given, and a spirit comes forward with a proposal involving deception through Ahab's prophets. Permission is granted, and the outcome is declared. This is a difficult passage, and we must treat it carefully. The vision does not teach that Adonai is deceived. It does not teach that falsehood possesses authority equal to his. It reveals Ahab under judicial consequence after a long pattern of rebellion, violence, idolatry, and rejection of prophetic warning. The king who repeatedly preferred falsehood is now surrounded by the message he desires. The heavenly scene exposes the judgment hidden behind the earthly consensus. The 400 prophets see agreement among themselves. Micaiah sees the throne. They hear one another. Micaiah hears the decree. They stand before Ahab. Micaiah has been permitted to behold the court above Ahab. This is precisely the difference Jeremiah later describes. The question is not how many prophets are speaking. The question is who has stood in the council. Micaiah's vision also shows us that a heavenly decision can enter earthly history through means that the human participants do not recognize. Ahab believes he is making a military decision. The prophets believe they are encouraging a royal campaign. The armies believe they are entering an ordinary battle. But the prophet sees that the event has already become the earthly manifestation of a heavenly judgment. This does not mean that human choices are unreal. Ahab chooses to ignore the warning. He chooses to imprison Micaiah. He chooses to enter the battle in disguise. He attempts to escape the announced outcome through strategy. Yet an arrow released without a specifically identified human target strikes between the joints of his armor. The decree spoken above finds its fulfillment below. The story teaches us that disguise may conceal a king from human eyes, but it cannot conceal him from the judgment already known before Adonai. The opening chapters of Job give us another heavenly court scene, but with a different purpose. The sons of God present themselves before Adonai, and the adversary appears among them. Adonai raises the matter of Job's integrity. The adversary challenges the nature of Job's faithfulness, arguing that Job serves Adonai because he has been protected and blessed. Limits are established concerning what may be touched and what must remain protected. When the adversary appears again, the limits are changed, but Job's life is still preserved by the command of Adonai. The earthly Job knows nothing of this conversation. He experiences loss, grief, bodily suffering, accusation, and confusion without being shown the heavenly scene known to the reader. This creates an extraordinary contrast. Micaiah is permitted to see the court and announce the decree. Job lives through the earthly consequences of a heavenly challenge without being told what occurred above. One servant is shown the counsel, another righteous servant is not shown it. This protects us from a dangerous assumption. Suffering does not prove that a person has been rejected by Adonai. And the absence of an explanation does not mean that heaven is absent. Job's friends attempt to interpret his suffering entirely from what they can observe on earth. They assume that severe suffering must be direct evidence of severe hidden sin, but the opening vision has already shown the reader that their explanation is incomplete. They are trying to interpret an earthly condition without access to the heavenly scene surrounding it. They speak confidently about a counsel in which they did not stand. This is one of the deepest warnings in the book of Job. Human beings often build absolute explanations from partial sight. We see the wound, we see the loss, we see the delay, we see what has been permitted, but we don't see the court, the challenge, the boundary Adonai has established. We cannot see everything that has been restrained. The heavenly court scenes of Micaiah and Job therefore reveal two different dimensions of the sod. In Micaiah's vision, the prophet sees a judgment determined concerning a rebellious king and is sent to testify before the earthly court. In Job's story, the reader sees a heavenly proceeding that remains concealed from the suffering servant himself. Together, these passages teach us that heaven may reveal the counsel to a prophet for public witness, while at other times the heavenly reason remains concealed even from the righteous person living through the event. The sod belongs to Adonai. He determines what is revealed. He determines who sees. He determines what must be spoken. And he determines what remains within his knowledge until the purpose has unfolded. This also reveals why false prophecy can become so dangerous within an assembly. When a minister living outside the will of Adonai speaks from a corrupted spiritual condition, the deception can spread through the assembly like leaven. As the people believe, repeat, and submit to the false word, the leader's private rebellion can become a corporate bondage. It may function like a spiritual enchantment, not because every person who hears the message has been automatically cursed, but because agreement with deception veils discernment and brings the believing congregation under the influence of a word Adonai never spoke. Those who hear the false word and reject it do not enter that same agreement. The spiritual danger begins when the hearer accepts the messenger as speaking for Adonai, receives the message as divine truth, and allows it to govern faith, loyalty, decisions, and spiritual perception. This is what happened in the earthly court of Ahab. The 400 prophets did not merely speak deception. Ahab believed the message because it agreed with the desire already within his heart. Their words strengthened him in the direction he had chosen, while Micaiah's true warning was rejected. The false word, therefore, became more than an incorrect prophecy. Through belief and submission, it became the spiritual atmosphere governing the king and those aligned with him. The danger of false prophecy is not complete when the prophet speaks. It reaches its greater power when the hearer believes, agrees, and begins walking according to a word that never proceeded from the counsel of Adonai. This brings the first half of our teaching to its turning point. We have entered the biblical courtroom. We have seen the throne and those standing around it. We have distinguished the prophet who has stood in the council from those who merely repeat the language expected by the earthly court. And we have seen two heavenly proceedings descend into two very different earthly experiences, the fall of a rebellious king and the testing of a righteous servant. In the second half, we will move from these opening court scenes into the greater throne visions of Isaiah and Daniel. We will examine the servants, witnesses, books, judgments, and commissions surrounding the throne. Then we will follow the mystery toward the Messiah, the daughter, and those who stand as witnesses before Adonai, and finally ask how a decree spoken in heaven reaches its appointed manifestation upon the earth. Thank you, family, for being here. If this teaching helped you, please like, comment, and share. It truly helps this message reach those who are seeking. To our new subscribers, welcome. And if you'd like to go deeper, we invite you to join as a member. The link is in the description and on our homepage. We are praying for you and standing with you in the light of Messiah He and Messiah She. If you'd like to support the ministry, you can visit our store or bless our dear brother Michael via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below, which also includes a link to our second store with new designs. Thank you for your love and encouragement, and stay tuned for the next video. May the spirit of wisdom and peace rest upon you always.